The research station floated in the darkness of space like a small metal island. It was called Meridian 7, and it orbited around a huge gas planet far away from Earth. For 3 years, the station had been home to dangerous creatures from all over the galaxy. Scientists kept them locked up and studied them. The most dangerous one was in Cell 7. Dr. Helen Carter stood in front of the thick glass window and looked at the creature inside. She had been studying it for 6 months but still felt scared every time she saw it. The thing was huge, almost 12 feet tall when it stood up straight. Its body was covered in black armor that looked like the shell of an insect. It had 6 arms and each one ended in claws as sharp as knives. Its head was long and its mouth was full of teeth that looked like they were made of glass. The worst part was its eyes. They were completely black and seemed to swallow all the light around them. The creature came from an old alien ship that had crashed on a dead planet. The aliens who built the ship were called Krillians, and they were gone now. But they had left behind this monster. They called it a Void Reaper, and they had made it to hunt and kill. Helen knew that keeping it here was dangerous, but the military wanted to study it. They wanted to know how it worked so they could make weapons to fight it. Peter Holloway was Helen's helper, and he sat at the control desk watching the computer screens. He was young and smart, but right now he looked worried. The screens showed lines and numbers that told them what was happening inside the creature's brain. Peter had been watching those lines go up and down all morning. The brain activity is getting higher again, Peter said without looking away from the screens. This is the 3rd time this week. Helen walked over to look at the screens. The creature was supposed to be asleep. They had special machines that kept it in a deep sleep so it could not move or think. But something was going wrong. The creature's brain was waking up even though it should not be able to. Make the sleep machine stronger, Helen said. Increase it by 20%. Peter touched some buttons on the control panel and shook his head. We are already using the maximum safe power. If we go higher, the containment field might break. Helen felt cold fear run down her back. The containment field was like an invisible wall made of energy that kept the creature locked in its cell. If that field broke, the creature would be free. Before she could say anything else, loud alarms started screaming all through the station. Red lights began flashing in the hallways. A computer voice spoke over the speakers and said that there was a containment breach on level 4. All workers should go to the safe rooms, right? Away level 4 was where they kept the Void Reaper. Helen looked through the window and her heart almost stopped. She could see cracks spreading across the containment field like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Inside the cell, the creature started to move. Its 6 arms unfolded slowly like a spider waking up. The energy field around it flickered and made a sound like breaking glass. Then it went out completely. The creature's black eyes opened and looked right at Helen. In that moment, she knew it could see her, and it was aware. The creature was not just a mindless monster. It was smart and it was angry. Seal this section now, Helen shouted at Peter. Get everyone to the escape pods. But she already knew they were too late. The heavy metal door of Cell 7 exploded outward with a terrible crash. The door was made of steel thick enough to stop bullets, but the creature tore through it like it was paper. The Void Reaper stepped out into the corridor, and its head moved from side to side as it tested the air. Then it began to run. The creature moved faster than anything that big should be able to move. Helen watched it disappear down the hallway toward the living quarters where most of the station workers were. A few seconds later, she heard the screaming start. Peter was already on the radio trying to call for help. This is Research Station Meridian 7. We have a code black emergency. The hostile creature has escaped containment. We need immediate military support. The radio crackled, but no answer came back. They were too far from any military base. Even if someone heard the call, it would take hours for help to arrive. Helen grabbed Peter's arm and pulled him toward the emergency exit. We have to get to the escape pods now, she said. They ran through the metal corridors of the station. The red emergency lights made everything look like it was covered in blood. Helen could hear more screaming in the distance and the sound of something heavy hitting metal walls. The creature was hunting through the station and it was fast. They reached the corridor that led to the escape pods, but then Helen heard footsteps running toward them from the other direction. It was Danny Martinez, the chief of station security. He was carrying a big plasma rifle and his face was covered in sweat. Behind him were 6 more security officers, all carrying weapons. They looked scared but ready to fight. Dr. Carter, get to the pods, Danny said. We will hold it here as long as we can. Helen wanted to tell him that their weapons would not be enough. She had studied the Void Reaper for months and she knew how strong it was. The creature's armor could stop most weapons and it could heal from injuries faster than any normal animal. But Danny and his team were already moving into position. They spread out across the corridor and aimed their rifles at the far end where the creature would come from. "Go now," Danny said again. Helen and Peter ran toward the escape pods. Behind them, they heard Danny shouting orders to his team. Then they heard the sound of plasma rifles firing. The bright blue bolts of energy lit up the corridor like lightning. There was a terrible screeching sound that could only be the Void Reaper. Then the screaming started again. Helen did not look back. She ran as fast as she could with Peter right behind her. They had to get off the station. They had to warn Earth about what had happened here. The Void Reaper was loose and nothing was going to stop it now. Danny Martinez had been a soldier for 15 years before he took the job as security chief on Meridian 7. He had fought in wars on 3 different colony planets, and he had seen many terrible things. He thought he was ready for anything. But when he saw the Void Reaper running down the corridor toward him and his team, he knew he was wrong. The creature moved like black water flowing over the floor. It was so fast that Danny almost could not see it clearly. One second it was far away and the next second it was right in front of them. Danny raised his plasma rifle and started shooting. The bright blue energy bolts hit the creature's chest and made small explosions on its black armor, but the creature did not slow down. "Fire everything," Danny shouted to his team. 6 more rifles opened up and the corridor filled with blue light. The plasma bolts hit the creature from all sides. Some of them bounced off the armor, but a few went through and left burning holes in the creature's skin. Black blood sprayed on the walls. The creature made a high screaming sound that hurt Danny's ears. For a moment he thought they might actually win. Then the Void Reaper moved again. It jumped up to the ceiling and ran along it like a spider. Its 6 claws dug into the metal and it moved so fast that the security officers could not aim at it properly. The creature dropped down right on top of Officer Lewis. Danny heard Lewis scream and then saw him fly through the air. His body hit the wall so hard that the metal bent inward. The creature's tail came up and stabbed Officer Grant through the chest. Grant made a choking sound and then went quiet. His rifle fell from his hands and clattered on the floor. The other officers were backing away now, still firing, but their shots were going wild. They were too scared to aim properly. "Fall back to the junction," Danny ordered. "We need more space," but there was no time. The Void Reaper was already moving toward Officer Shaw. Linda Shaw was one of Danny's best people. She had been in the military too, and she knew how to fight. She rolled to the side and the creature's claws missed her by inches. She came up firing and her shots hit the creature right in the face. The creature's head snapped back and it made that terrible screaming sound again. For just a second, Danny thought Linda might have hurt it badly. But then the creature's head came forward again and its black eyes focused on her. It moved faster than before. Its tail whipped around and caught Linda in the stomach. She flew backward and crashed into the wall next to where Lewis had fallen. Danny was still firing. His rifle was getting hot from shooting so much. He saw his shots hitting the creature, but it was not stopping. It was barely even slowing down. The thing was like a machine that could not be broken. One by one, the other officers went down. Officer Park was grabbed by 2 of the creature's arms and thrown into Officer Hayes. They both hit the floor and did not get up. Then it was just Danny left standing. His rifle clicked empty. He had run out of power. The Void Reaper stood in front of him, its black armor covered in burns and holes where the plasma bolts had hit it. Black blood dripped from its wounds onto the floor. But the creature was still standing, still moving, still hunting. Danny dropped the empty rifle and pulled out his backup weapon, a small plasma pistol. He knew it would not be enough, but he was not going to just give up. He aimed at the creature's eyes and fired. The shot went wide and hit the wall behind the creature. His hands were shaking too much. The Void Reaper's tail came at him like a spear. Danny tried to dodge, but he was too slow. The tail hit him in the side with tremendous force. He felt his ribs crack and then he was flying backward through the air. He hit the wall so hard that his vision went dark for a second. When he could see again, the creature was walking away from him. It was heading toward the cafeteria. Danny tried to get up, but his body would not work right. His ribs were broken and every breath hurt like fire. He could taste blood in his mouth. Through his blurry vision, he watched the Void Reaper reach the cafeteria door. The door was made of heavy steel and it was locked from the inside. The people inside must have sealed it when they heard the alarms. The creature grabbed the door with its claws and pulled. The metal screamed and bent. Then the door came off its hinges like it was made of cardboard. The creature threw the door aside and it crashed down the hallway. Danny could hear people screaming inside the cafeteria. He wanted to help them, but he could not move. His radio was broken and his weapons were gone. The Void Reaper stepped through the doorway into the cafeteria. Danny could see about 20 people inside. They were scientists and support workers, not fighters. They were all pressed against the far wall, trying to get as far from the creature as possible. Some of them were crying. Others were frozen with fear. The creature stood in the doorway and its head moved slowly as it looked at all of them. It was deciding which one to kill first. Danny closed his eyes. He had failed. All his training and all his experience had not been enough. The creature was too strong and too fast. In a few seconds, everyone in that cafeteria would be dead, and it would be his fault for not stopping it. But then something strange happened. The creature stopped moving. Danny opened his eyes and saw that the Void Reaper was standing completely still. It was not attacking the people in the cafeteria. It was just standing there like it was waiting for something. Danny could not understand what was happening. Why had the creature stopped? Then he heard footsteps coming from the other direction. Someone else was coming down the corridor. Danny turned his head, even though it hurt to move, and saw a man walking toward them. The man was wearing a maintenance worker's uniform. He had a tool belt around his waist, and he was carrying a plasma cutter, the kind used for cutting through metal. He did not look like a fighter. He looked like a regular person who worked on the station fixing broken machines. The man walked past Danny without looking at him. He walked right up to the cafeteria door and stood behind the Void Reaper. The creature still had not moved. It was like a statue now. The man raised his plasma cutter and shouted at the creature. "Hey," the man said in a loud voice. "Turn around." The Void Reaper turned around slowly. It looked at the man, and then the strangest thing happened. The creature took a step backward. Jake Morrison had been working the night shift in the engineering section when the alarm started. He was a maintenance worker, not a scientist or a soldier. His job was to fix broken things on the station. That night, he was repairing a coolant leak in one of the lower levels. The work was boring and he was tired. Then the alarms went off and everything changed. At first, Jake thought it was just a drill. The station did drills every month to make sure everyone knew what to do in an emergency. But then he heard the gunfire. Plasma rifles made a very specific sound when they fired, and Jake had heard that sound before during his time in the Civilian Defense Corps. Real plasma rifles meant real danger. Jake grabbed his tools and started running toward the upper levels. He should have gone to the escape pods like everyone else. That was the smart thing to do. But Jake had friends on this station, people he worked with every day. He could not just leave them behind without knowing if they were safe. The corridors were filled with red emergency lights that made everything look wrong. Jake passed by bodies lying on the floor and he had to force himself not to look too closely at them. Some of them were people he knew. He kept running. In an emergency equipment locker, he found a plasma cutter. It was meant for cutting through metal walls, but Jake thought it might work as a weapon if he needed one. He could hear screaming coming from somewhere above him. He followed the sound up 3 levels until he reached the main corridor that led to the cafeteria. That was when he saw the security team. They were lying on the floor and none of them were moving. Their weapons were scattered around them. The walls were covered in burn marks from plasma fire and there was blood everywhere. Danny Martinez was slumped against one wall. He was still breathing, but he looked badly hurt. His eyes were open, but they were not focused on anything. Jake wanted to stop and help him, but then he heard more screaming from the cafeteria. He had to keep moving. The cafeteria door was lying in the middle of the corridor. It had been torn completely off its hinges. Through the open doorway, Jake could see people pressed against the far wall. They looked terrified. And standing in the doorway with its back to him was the thing from Cell 7. Jake had seen it before on security monitors, but seeing it in person was different. It was bigger than he expected, and it moved in a way that made his brain hurt to watch. Jake did not think about what he was doing. If he had stopped to think, he probably would have run away. Instead, he walked right up behind the creature and shouted at it. "Hey," Jake said. "Turn around." The creature turned around and looked at him. Its black eyes seemed to see right through him. Jake felt like all the air had been sucked out of the corridor. He could not breathe. He could not move. The creature was taller than him, and its 6 arms ended in claws that could tear him apart in seconds. Jake knew he was about to die, but then something impossible happened. The creature took a step backward. Then another step. It was backing away from him.
Jake did not understand.
The creature had just killed trained security officers without even trying. Why was it backing away from a maintenance worker with a plasma cutter? That's right, Jake said, his voice shaking. Back off. The creature took another step back. Its head tilted to one side like it was confused. Jake raised the plasma cutter a little higher, even though his hands were trembling so much he could barely hold it. The creature's eyes never left his face. It was watching him with complete focus. Then the Void Reaper did something that made Jake's brain stop working completely. The creature lowered its body down until its head was touching the floor. Its 6 arms folded underneath it and its whole body went still. It looked like it was bowing, like it was showing respect or submission. Jake stood there frozen with his mouth open. He could not process what he was seeing. Behind the creature, the people in the cafeteria were staring at him with the same shocked expression. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the alarm still blaring through the station's speakers. What the hell? Someone in the cafeteria whispered. Jake did not know what to do. He had not planned for this. He had expected to die fighting the creature, or to run away if he got the chance. He had not expected the creature to bow to him. Slowly, very slowly, Jake lowered the plasma cutter and took a step to the side. He was giving the creature room to leave if it wanted to. The Void Reaper raised its head but stayed in its bowing position. Its eyes followed Jake as he moved. Jake took another step to the side and pointed down the corridor with his free hand. Go that way, Jake said. Move. The creature stood up slowly. It did not make any aggressive moves. It just stood there waiting. Jake pointed again, and this time the creature moved. It walked in the direction Jake had pointed. It moved past him, staying several feet away like it was being careful not to get too close. Jake watched it go and his heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. The Void Reaper walked down the corridor and stopped at an intersection. It turned its head and looked back at Jake like it was waiting for more instructions. Jake pointed to the left and the creature turned left. It was actually obeying him. Jake could not believe it. He followed the creature, keeping a safe distance behind it. He had no idea where he was taking it, but he knew it needed to be away from the cafeteria and away from the injured security officers. Behind him, the people from the cafeteria started coming out slowly. They were still scared, but they could see that the creature was not attacking anymore. Stay back, Jake told them without turning around. Just stay there and don't follow us. Jake led the creature through the corridors for almost 10 minutes. The Void Reaper followed every direction he gave it. When he told it to stop, it stopped. When he told it to turn, it turned. It was like walking a very large and very dangerous dog. Eventually, they reached an empty storage bay. Jake pointed at the open door. In there, he said. The creature walked into the storage bay and sat down in the middle of the floor. It folded its arms and lowered its head again in that strange bowing position. Jake stood in the doorway staring at it. His mind was full of questions that he could not answer. Why had the creature attacked the security team but not him? Why was it obeying him? What was different about him? He heard footsteps running toward him and turned to see Helen Carter and several other people coming down the corridor. Helen was carrying a tablet and she looked like she had been running hard. She stopped when she saw Jake standing in the doorway with the creature sitting calmly behind him. How? Helen said breathlessly. How are you doing this? I have no idea, Jake said honestly. I just told it to move and it moved. Helen looked past him at the Void Reaper. The creature had not moved since it sat down. It was just sitting there like it was waiting for Jake to tell it what to do next. Helen raised her tablet and started recording everything. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were bright with scientific curiosity. We need to get it back into containment, Helen said. Do you think it will follow you? Jake looked at the creature. The creature looked back at him with those black eyes that seemed to go on forever. Jake had no idea if this would work, but he had to try. Come on, Jake said to the creature. Let's go. The Void Reaper stood up immediately and walked toward him. Jake led it through the corridors of the station back toward the containment area. The whole way the creature followed him like a shadow. Other people saw them and pressed themselves against the walls to get out of the way. They all stared with fear and wonder at the impossible sight of a human, walking calmly with the deadliest creature in the galaxy, following behind him like an obedient pet. Helen Carter sat in her office staring at the security video for the 10th time. She had been watching it over and over for the past 5 hours, trying to understand what had happened. On the screen, Jake Morrison walked up to the Void Reaper with nothing but a plasma cutter in his hands. The creature turned to face him and then it bowed. Every time Helen watched it, she felt like she was missing something important. The station was in chaos. 11 people were dead and 20 more were injured. The medical bay was full. Danny Martinez was in surgery and the doctors were not sure if he would survive. The Void Reaper was locked in a new containment cell, and this time Helen had tripled the security. But the creature was not trying to escape. It just sat in its cell and waited. Sometimes it would look at the door like it was waiting for Jake to come back. There was a knock on Helen's office door, and Nina Wells came in carrying a stack of papers and a data tablet. Nina was Helen's research assistant, and she had been working all night trying to figure out what had happened. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "I ran every test I could think of on Jake Morrison's blood samples," Nina said as she sat down. "DNA analysis, hormone levels, genetic markers, everything. There is nothing unusual about him. He is completely normal by every measure we have." "Then why did the creature react to him that way?" Helen asked. "It killed trained soldiers without hesitation, but it bowed to a maintenance worker." "There has to be a reason." Nina put the papers on Helen's desk and pulled up a file on her tablet. "I think I found the answer, but you are not going to like it. Do you remember when we recovered the Void Reaper from that Krillian ship? We also recovered the ship's computer database. Most of it was corrupted, but I have been working on translating the parts we could save." Helen leaned forward. "What did you find?" "The Krillians did not just make the Void Reapers to be weapons," Nina said. "They made them to hunt a specific type of creature. The database calls them Deathworlders. According to the records, the Krillians encountered these Deathworlders about 3,000 years ago during their expansion into the Perseus arm of the galaxy. The war that followed almost destroyed the Krillian civilization." "What are Deathworlders?" Helen asked. Nina pulled up a document on her tablet and started reading. "Beings from high-gravity planets with extreme environments. Species that evolved at the top of brutal food chains. They have enhanced healing, high pain tolerance, and aggressive survival instincts. The Krillians were terrified of them. They made the Void Reaper specifically to hunt and kill Deathworlders." Helen felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Are you saying that humans are Deathworlders?" "We match every characteristic the Krillians used to define them," Nina said. "Earth is a high-gravity planet by galactic standards. Our evolution was shaped by constant competition with other predators. We heal faster than most known species. Our pain tolerance is extremely high. We are apex predators who evolved the ability to hunt anything on our planet." Helen stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the stars and tried to process what Nina was telling her. Humans had only been traveling in space for about 100 years. They had always thought of themselves as newcomers to the galaxy. But if what Nina was saying was true, then humans had been in space before. Thousands of years before. "But we have no record of ancient space travel," Helen said. "Human history only goes back a few thousand years, and there is no evidence of advanced technology before that." "Something catastrophic must have happened," Nina said. "Something that sent humanity back to the Stone Age and made us forget everything. But the galaxy remembered. The Krillians remembered. And they built bioweapons to make sure they would never face Deathworlders again." "That still does not explain why the creature bowed to Jake," Helen said. Nina pulled up another file. "The Void Reapers have a failsafe built into their programming. If they encounter a Deathworlder who shows mercy or restraint, they are supposed to submit immediately. The Krillians believed that any Deathworlder powerful enough to show mercy instead of attacking was too dangerous to fight. Submission was the only way to survive." Helen turned around slowly. "You are saying the creature bowed to Jake because he did not attack it right away?" "Exactly," Nina said. "The security team fought the creature. They showed combat behavior. The Void Reaper responded with combat behavior and killed them. But Jake did something different. He confronted the creature without immediately attacking. He stood his ground and gave it a chance to back down. That behavior triggered the failsafe. The creature recognized Jake as a Deathworlder showing restraint, and its programming forced it to submit." Helen sat back down in her chair. Her mind was racing through all the implications. "The galaxy needs to know about this." "The galaxy will panic," Nina said quickly. "Humans have only been in space for a century. We are seen as primitive newcomers with stolen technology. If other species find out that we are classified as Deathworlders, that we are the same species that terrified the Krillians into building bioweapons, they will be afraid of us. Some of them might try to destroy Earth before we become a threat." "But we are not a threat," Helen protested. "We are peaceful. We trade with other species. We help colonies that need assistance. We are not monsters. We do not have to be monsters for them to be afraid of us, Nina said. Think about what we just saw. A single unarmed human made the deadliest bioweapon in known spacebow in submission. That is terrifying. And if word gets out that there are billions of us on Earth, that we have weapons and ships and colonies spreading through space, other species are going to be very worried. Helen rubbed her face with her hands. She was exhausted and overwhelmed. What do we do about Jake? He is the only person who can control the creature. We need him to stay here, Nina said. As long as Jake is on the station, the Void Reaper will remain calm. We can study their interaction and learn more about what it means to be human. Maybe we can understand why we evolved this way and what our place in the galaxy really is. There was another knock on the door and Jake Morrison came in. He looked tired and confused. He had been answering questions for hours and nobody had been able to explain to him why the creature had obeyed him. Helen gestured for him to sit down. We have been analyzing what happened, Helen said carefully. We think we know why the creature reacted to you the way it did. I would really like to know, Jake said. Because it makes no sense to me. Helen and Nina explained everything they had discovered. They told Jake about the Krillians and the ancient war with Deathworlders. They told him about Earth's true place in galactic history. They explained the fail-safe programming and why the Void Reaper had submitted to him. Jake listened without interrupting. When they finished, he sat quietly for a long moment. So you are telling me that humans are the scary monsters that aliens have nightmares about? Jake said finally. In a way, yes, Helen said. Jake laughed, but it was not a happy sound. I fix air conditioning units. I repair coolant leaks. I'm not a scary monster. But you could be, Nina said. That is what the creature recognized. You have the potential to be dangerous. All humans do. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day and we survived. We became so good at surviving that we learned to show mercy to weaker creatures. That combination of deadly capability and voluntary restraint is what makes us terrifying to other species. Jake stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the stars just like Helen had done a few minutes before. What happens now? We need you to stay here and work with the creature, Helen said. We need to understand this connection between humans and Deathworlders. And we need to figure out how to tell the rest of the galaxy that humans are not a threat, even though we could be. Jake turned back to face them. And if the galaxy does not believe us, if they decide we are too dangerous to live, then we hope that our ability to show mercy will convince them to show mercy to us, Helen said. But in her heart, Helen was not sure that would be enough. 3 weeks passed since the containment breach, and Jake Morrison found himself spending more time with the Void Reaper than with other humans. The creature had been moved to a better cell with stronger security, but it had not tried to escape once. It just sat quietly and waited for Jake to visit. Sometimes Jake would talk to it even though he knew it probably could not understand his words. Other times they would just sit in silence on opposite sides of the containment field. Helen Carter had been working day and night to decode more of the Krillian database. She had brought in linguists and xenobiologists from Earth to help translate the alien data. Slowly they were learning more about the Void Reapers and the ancient war between the Krillians and the Deathworlders. Every new piece of information made the picture clearer and more disturbing. On this particular morning, Jake was sitting in the observation room watching the Void Reaper through the window. The creature was curled up with its head resting on its folded arms. It looked almost peaceful. Helen came in carrying her tablet as usual. She had dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, but she seemed excited about something. We made a breakthrough, Helen said as she sat down next to Jake. The Void Reaper has limited telepathic abilities. It was designed that way so multiple Reapers could coordinate during hunts. Our linguists figured out how to establish basic communication with it. Jake looked at her with surprise. It can talk? Not with words the way we do, Helen said. But it can project simple concepts and emotions. We have been recording what it sends out and translating it. It has been asking for you. Helen handed Jake the tablet. On the screen were lines of translated text. The words were strange and did not quite make sense, but Jake could understand the meaning behind them. The Void Reaper was confused. It had been created to hunt and kill Deathworlders, but when it encountered Jake, something in its programming had overridden the kill command. The creature did not understand why. It was afraid of Jake, but also drawn to him. It recognized him as something that should be destroyed, but also as something that should be obeyed. It keeps mentioning something called the Endless War, Jake said as he read through the text. What is that? Helen pulled up a star map on the main display screen. The map showed a section of the galaxy that Jake did not recognize. According to the Krillian records, there was a war that lasted for 200 years. It started when the Krillians expanded into an area of space called the Perseus Arm. They encountered a species there that they had never seen before, Deathworlders. Helen zoomed in on a small yellow star. The Deathworlders came from a planet that the Krillians called the Crucible of Nightmares. High gravity, violent weather, aggressive predators everywhere. The Krillians believed it was the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Any species that could survive there would be nearly unstoppable in combat. Jake stared at the star on the screen. Something about it looked familiar. Where is that? Helen zoomed out to show more of the map. Then she highlighted another star in a different color. It was Earth's sun. Jake looked at the distance between the two stars and his blood went cold. They were the same star. The Crucible of Nightmares was Earth. "We are the Deathworlders," Jake said quietly. "Yes," Helen said. "Our ancestors spread through the stars 3,000 years ago. They were so aggressive and so good at fighting that they nearly wiped out the Krillian civilization. The Krillians only survived by retreating to the edge of the galaxy and building bioweapons like the Void Reapers. But something happened to humanity after that. Something catastrophic. We lost all our technology and all our memories. We went back to living in caves and hunting with stone tools. But the galaxy never forgot what we were." Jake stood up and walked to the window. The Void Reaper raised its head and looked at him. Those black eyes that had terrified him 3 weeks ago now just looked sad. "Why do we not remember any of this?" "We do not know," Helen said. "Maybe there was a plague that killed most humans and destroyed our records. Maybe there was a civil war that set our civilization back thousands of years. The Krillian database does not say what happened. It only says that the Deathworlders suddenly stopped expanding and their ships disappeared from space. The Krillians thought they had won the war. They did not know that humanity had just forgotten how to fight. But we remembered eventually," Jake said. "We built new ships and came back to space." "Yes," Helen said. "And now we are encountering the weapons that were built to kill us. The Void Reaper is just one of them. According to the database, the Krillians built thousands of these creatures and spread them throughout the galaxy. Most of them are still in stasis waiting for Deathworlders to appear. Now that humans are exploring space again, we are going to keep running into them." Jake turned back to face Helen. "What happens when we do? Are they all going to bow like this one did?" "Only if we show them mercy," Helen said. "The failsafe only works when a Deathworlder demonstrates restraint. If we attack first or if we show fear and run away, the Void Reapers will hunt us down and kill us. But if we stand our ground and give them a chance to submit, they will recognize what we are and bow. The Krillians programmed them that way because they believed that any Deathworlder capable of showing mercy was too dangerous to fight." Jake looked back at the Void Reaper. "They were afraid of us because we could choose not to kill them." "Exactly," Helen said. "Most predators kill because they have to. They need food or they need to defend territory. But humans can choose. We can kill when we need to, but we can also show mercy when we want to. That ability to choose makes us unpredictable, and unpredictable predators are the most dangerous kind." Over the next few days, Helen started receiving reports from other human stations and colonies. The same thing was happening all over human space. Ancient bioweapons were activating and encountering humans for the first time in thousands of years. Some of the encounters went badly and people died. But in other cases, the bioweapons submitted when they realized they were facing Deathworlders who chose not to attack immediately. The news spread quickly through the galactic community. Other alien species learned that humans were the Deathworlders from the ancient legends. Some species were afraid and wanted Earth to be quarantined. Other species were curious and wanted to establish stronger diplomatic relations. A few species were hostile and wanted to attack Earth before humanity could become a threat. The human government held an emergency meeting with representatives from dozens of alien species. They explained what had been discovered about humanity's past. They showed videos of Jake Morrison making the Void Reaper bow. They tried to convince the galaxy that humans were peaceful and did not want war. Some species believed them. Others did not. But what everyone agreed on was that humanity could not be ignored anymore. For better or worse, humans had taken their place in galactic history, not as newcomers, but as the returning survivors of an ancient war. Jake continued to work with the Void Reaper. He learned more about its programming and its purpose. He discovered that the creature was not evil or malicious. It was just following its nature the same way any animal follows its instincts. The Krillians had created it to kill, but they had also given it the wisdom to recognize when killing would be suicide. The Void Reaper had learned that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. One day Jake asked Helen what would happen to the creature. Would it be kept in a cell forever or would it be destroyed? Helen thought about the question for a long time before answering. I think we should let it go, Helen said finally. Send it back into space where it came from. It is not our enemy. It is just a tool that was made for a war that ended thousands of years ago. Keeping it locked up seems cruel. Will it attack other humans if we release it? Jake asked. Not if they show it the same respect you did, Helen said. The failsafe is permanent. Once a Void Reaper submits to a Death Worlder, it will never attack that species again. We just need to make sure other humans know how to behave when they encounter one. So they released the Void Reaper. They put it on a small ship and launched it toward the edge of the galaxy, where the Krillians had originally come from. Jake watched the ship disappear into the darkness of space. He felt sad to see the creature go, even though it had killed 11 people on the station. In a strange way, he had formed a connection with it. They were both products of ancient decisions made by species that no longer existed. They were both trying to find their place in a galaxy that had changed while they slept. As Jake turned to leave the observation deck, he saw his reflection in the window. He looked the same as he had a month ago. Same face, same body, same maintenance worker uniform, but he felt different inside. He knew now that he was part of something much larger and older than he had ever imagined. He was a Death Worlder, a survivor from a species that had terrified the galaxy thousands of years ago, and even though humanity had forgotten its past, the universe had not forgotten. The question now was what humans would do with this knowledge. Would they embrace their nature as apex predators, or would they continue to show mercy and restraint? Jake did not know the answer, but he knew that the choice would define humanity's future among the stars. And that future started now.